Welcome everyone to MSLA's Balancing the Badge, the talk. Like I said, my name is Vishaal Kuruvanka and I'm the director for Mayor Turner Student Leadership Alliance. I'm going to be one of the moderators for this event, along with my fellow council members, the Civic Engagement Chair, Margaret Odunze, and our Social Justice Chair, Hiba Loya. As the events of police brutality unfolded over the summer, we here at MSLA wanted to constructively add to solving this issue. After much deliberation as a council, we came to the conclusion that holding a roundtable with police chiefs, community stakeholders, and students could be the first step to reduce incidents of the sort that we just recently saw this week with the killing of Dante Wright and countless many others. Our goal is to establish effective communication and transparency that clarifies misconceptions, promotes mutually beneficial solutions for those serving and living in our society, and begins building a sense of trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. We will begin this event by posing some questions to officers, but we also ask that the officers pose questions to the students as well. We want to treat this as much as an in-person roundtable discussion as possible. With this, I'll hand it off to my fellow moderator, Margaret, to speak more about our rules and how the event will flow today. Take it from there, Margaret.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here, for joining us, and just for taking part in this event. And so I really especially want to say thank you to all of our panelists, and I want to give a small, brief introduction of each. We have here the HPD Chief, Mr. Troy Finner. We also have the UHCL Chief, Mr. Russell Miller, and we also have the UH Chief, Mr. Cesar Moore, and the Rice Chief, Mr. Clemente Rodriguez, the Captain Patrol District Commander, Ms. Trish Vidito, and we also have a Black Lives Matter representative, Mr. Brandon Mack. And even though he is not a police officer, he is someone that has a lot of insight into what is going on in this community. And so we do really want to have him share his perspectives of just what it's like as a minority person and the fight that we all are going through right now and what it's like to see it from the outside. And so we do, as Vishaal stated, want to begin by just posing questions to the officers, but we want you all to realize that this is not going to be your typical Q&A, right? So this is definitely going to be almost like an in-person coffee table discussion. We will have our first question to the officers, but we also want you all to ask questions as well from the jump. So I will be posting in the chat a link, and in that link, you all can click on it and ask your questions either anonymously, where one of the moderators will read your question, or you can ask it yourself. If you state that you would like to ask the question yourself, we will make sure to call on you. Now, in doing so, we just ask that you all remain on mute until you are called upon, or unless you are speaking. And so once we bandy about questions that way, the officers will then like to ask questions of all of the attendees. And so this is really an opportunity for you to tell the officers your perspectives, to let the officers know, policies and procedures that you think might work on your campus or that you've seen in the community. And so that is something that we really wanted to foster. We do ask that you please be mindful about the issues regarding discrimination. These are sensitive topics, and we want to respect those who are serving our country, both are serving our cities, or serving our state, as well as those who have been affected by recent events. And so without further ado, we definitely want to go ahead and get started. And so Vishaal, I know you had a really good question, and so we're going to go ahead and start from there.
Yep, thank you, Margaret. So yes, I'll start us off with the first question here. And I wanted to actually direct this to our newly appointed HPD Chief, Troy Finner. So, as I stated, during the summer, we started to plan this event, and, I kind of want to bring it back to that. Since the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and I do realize you were not the police chief at the time, but, what were some changes, if any, that HPD made to the way they run things? And the question is worded broadly so that after Troy Finner answered this question, we can pass it along to our other police chiefs to add on to that discussion as well.
Hey, well, let me first say I'm honored to be here to spend time with our future of our nation, young men and young women I see before me. Also want to thank my colleagues for being here as well. Changes that we made, just as any other police department, we were horrified. And let me start with the George Floyd incident. What people have to understand, the majority of police officers do the right thing. You got 800,000 police officers in the United States, 18,000 police departments. Most of them do a great job every day. They come and they take care of business, but we were so upset and horrified when we saw the footage of what happened to Mr. Floyd. But in terms of making changes, when you see something like that, as a chief, an executive assistant chief, and other chiefs can speak as well, you always look at, well, you know what can we do to make sure that that doesn't happen here in Houston or in our area? So you looked at everybody. They took a quick look at their use of force policies and procedures. I think nobody in the country now has chokehold techniques anymore. And what was kind of amazing, some of the agencies around, we've never taught that. And Chief Moore was a commander, captain here before he left, and he can attest to this. We never taught that in our police academy, chokeholds, so things like that. But the work really begins before those critical incidents. The work here in Houston and building relationships and building trust, it's an everyday thing. And that's why we fared pretty well here, because we have strong relationships, and you have to build upon what I call peace times, and you build those relationships up, get into, just like what we're doing today. And I'm always going to be on board when we're doing something like this, because we learn from one another. You have to look deep into a person's history, their perceptions, and their life experiences. And it may be different from yours, but when you take the time to give it some value, then you get communication where you can build bridges that will lead to an understanding, that will lead to a bridge of trust.
Thank you, Police Chief Finner. If any of the other police chiefs would like to add on to that question, kind of specifically talk about some of the changes they made in that department, I think that'd be a good segue here.
And again, if you're a student and you have any questions that you would like to submit, whether anonymously or you would like to ask it yourself, there's a link in the chat to submit the questions. Feel free to type your question as well if you're comfortable with that.
Okay, I can jump in here. What we did different, I will say, I sent out a letter to the entire U of H community addressing the George Floyd killing, and also making sure that the community knew that we don't have a chokehold policy. When I came to U of H 9 years ago, I made sure that was in the policy. The duty to intervene was there. And that's one of the reasons us being accredited is important, because a lot of the policies that people are requesting to occur, accredited agencies already have those things. As far as university police departments go, I think about 1.5% of all university agencies are accredited. And I'm the vice chancellor for the U of H system. So all of the U of H police departments, main campus, downtown, and Clear Lake are accredited. And because the way U of H is constructed, Victoria, Sugar Land, Katy, Medical Center are part of the U of H main campus, so their functions are accredited also. U of H also instituted a social justice and racial equity committee with 4 subgroups, and we met with students for an extended period of time to address their issues and concerns and to hear from them. And so there is a number of takeaways that we took from those meetings, and the chancellor has us now in the process of implementing those across the system. So that's one of the things that we did as a system. Internally within the department, immediately after George Floyd, I was reading a lot of the literature that was prevalent at the time, and the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, was very popular. So every one of my commanders, which is lieutenants and higher, we were all, I required everybody to read that. And then we had discussions around that. When we see other things that happen in the nation, not to bore the group with it, but they get a lot of information from me, a lot of readings. And that's one of the things we do. We try to make sure that we're well read and read things that are relevant and prevalent, and teach in the area of, I'm going to call it race relations. We did a lot of anti-bias training, a lot of sensitivity training after George Floyd's death. And not that it was new, we wanted to make sure that we reaffirmed it with our team to make sure that they saw how important it was and how relationships are important. So I wouldn't say that we did things new. I think we reinforced what we were already doing. And I did mention the Chancellor's Social Justice and Racial Equity Committee, in addition to the readings that we've done. And I've had contact with ADL, a lot of contact with Dina over there, making sure that we're in the flow of information coming from them regarding things that are important and how people are treated in our community. I yield.
And I'll just say a few words, and not to repeat, because I think Chief Finner and Chief Moore both covered pretty much what I think most chiefs and most departments did after the George Floyd incident. And we've done this with other incidents as well, high profile incidents. We look at them and we debrief on what happened, and in a way that we want to learn from those experiences from other departments and try not to, make, if there was any mistakes, make the same mistakes that others may have made before us. So if we don't learn from those experiences, then it's a waste. So we looked at that and we did the same thing. I went around to all of my roll calls and I had a very frank and open discussion about what disturbed me with the George Floyd incident was the fact that there were other officers who were there who could have intervened, who could have stepped up, and to say, look what it could have done if just one of them would have had the courage to speak up and say, let me take it from here and move that officer in a way, could have saved a lot of people's lives, a lot of things that we went through. And so I talked to every officer and I said, I don't care if you've been here 6 months, 6 years, 16 years, 36 years. If you see an officer, you don't need to have years of experience to see what's right and wrong. You have a duty to step up. And if you don't, you're going to be just as accountable as those who might have been involved in an excessive use of force. So I was very clear about that. And that was just one of the things that we talked about. And I agree. We all, in law enforcement, we're just as horrified by what we saw as everyone else. But we also took it as a chance to say, we've got to make sure, we want to believe that would never happen, but you don't take those things for granted. So you have those conversations.
So I do want to ask, how is what you all are learning influencing the way you are doing your jobs? Because you all have spoken about, changing the technique, changing, having reform, but it seems like time and again, we see things on the news and we speak about reform, but then another incident happens. And we talk about reform again, and then another incident happens. And so I guess it can be confusing and upsetting when it seems like there should be progression, but for every step forward, there seems to be a step back, and it seems to be targeted, especially in the minority community. So I guess, how does that influence your job and the way you're doing your job when you see these instances, and the way that you want to decrease discrimination, and the way that you want to build trust and improve faith in local law enforcement when we do see these events happening and taking place?
I'll step in first if you don't mind. One thing, we have to put things in perspective, and we can't make excuses, okay? You're right. Problems with police historically in communities of color is a way of life sometimes, you know, and you can't sidestep that. You have to address that. But when there's racism and other things, injustices in the community, it's gonna filter its way into the police department. So when we're talking to different groups, we have to give value to that and talk to people and say, look, you know, this is what we're doing, but also tell them the truth. You know, just in the city of Houston, we average 1.5 million calls for service a year. The great majority of those stops and investigations and calls for service, they end and everything is fine. You know, the citizen is fine, but we are the only profession. You know, doctors make mistakes and kill people every day around our country, you know, but when an officer does something, it's just blown up, and it should be, okay? Because it's a lot of authority and a lot of power given to us, you know, by law, and that's what people, that's the difference. But at the same time, and especially our young people in a group like this, I want y'all to know, keep it in perspective though. If one officer out of a million kills somebody unjustly, it is a problem and it hurts all of us. But don't throw that indictment out on all agencies and all departments, you know, because when we do that and we drop a blanket on people, we have a tendency of not focusing in on those few bad officers. And then, you know, we cause problems in our community amongst good officers and good people. So good officers and good people need to come together just like we're doing today and discuss it and focus in on those bad apples in agencies, weed them out of there, you know, and that's how we need to move forward on it. But anytime you see something on the TV, yeah, it looks bad. And you'll say, well, that's all police officers, but it's not. Go ahead. I know it's a hand up there.
No, thank you so much, Chief Finner. We appreciate your response. So we've gotten quite a few questions. I'm going to go ahead and read the first one. Chief Finner, since you're talking, I think this question is directed towards you. During peaceful protests in Houston following the wrongful death of George Floyd, there were numerous officers not wearing badges with visible numbers, making arrests and using force towards protesters. Is this a policy you wish to continue, and why?
Let me clarify that. We don't have any officers not with badge numbers and you know, kind of covering up. I was out there on that front line every night, you know, so I can't speak to every incident, but I know that if anybody brought anything to our attention, we conducted investigations. Very few officers were disciplined. We looked at hours and hours of body-worn camera, and we really didn't see a whole lot of misbehavior from our HPD officers. So again, I like to get the facts straight. And I think it's important because, you know, the person who's asking that, no disrespect to them, but if they can't give me a specific incident or whatnot, the generalities, it kind of, you know, gets us in trouble sometimes, and it doesn't make things better. Because let me tell you something, I want to quickly speak to our young men and young women in our city and kids of color who the untold story was during that George Floyd protest. A lot of them stepped up right on side of the police officers. I saw some gang members, I saw some hip hop people standing up and touching me on my back and say, hey, Chief Finner, we're not going to allow anybody from outside our city to come in and take over and damage property and hurt people. So that's the untold story. So it was a lot of unity in the city of Houston. So that's the truth.
All right, thank you for that response. I'm going to follow up with another question, and this one is open to the entire panel as a whole. Why is it that people from Black and brown communities are never the ones policing their own communities? AKA, why are the majority of inner city police majority white suburban folk policing a community they do not know or understand?
I'll take a shot at that one. Can I take a shot at that one? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I started as a patrolman in 1984, and I worked in 3rd Ward. Matter of fact, U of H was in my beat as a young patrol officer. And the majority of the officers that worked in 3rd Ward with me at the time, they were Black. So the racial makeup of the officers in areas, of course, is going to vary. And they're going to because Houston does not have a requirement that you have to live in the city in order to work. And some cities have tried that. It's a difficulty with staffing and doing that. But I agree that your police force needs to be diverse, and your police force ideally would match the diversity of your city. So if you have a diverse force that matches the diversity of your city or your group, then you will have probably the appropriate number of people, representation of all groups in most areas. But
so Houston should have one of the most diverse groups of police officers then. Is that true?
Can I give y'all some quick, numbers right quick? So we have a little over 5,300 officers in a good day, and we patrol 671 square miles. If you look at in terms of African-American police officers, we're a little over 20%. It's kind of reflective of the population. Latinos is up to about 26%. And you know the Latino population is over 40% now in Houston. Very diverse. Diversity is very important. But I get this question all the time when I go to community meetings around the city before COVID, okay, because we hadn't had a lot. Say, Chief Finner, why y'all don't have Black and more brown police officers in the neighborhood? You know what? Diversity is important and we like to have it. But let me tell you what, that's kind of frustrating. Don't ever discount our white officers who've been in our Black and brown areas for their entire career, 25, 30, 35 years, never shot anyone, never got a complaint. So not so much about race, it's about the heart. And I want good-hearted individuals that care about and love their community. Now, you do need that diversity, and it helps because you know what? Nobody can tell me how it is when I came up and born in 5th Ward and raised in Hiram Clark. I know how that feels. I know the challenges, okay? As compared to somebody who grew up in the country. So you need the diversity, but let's not forget about the heart. Talk about the heart, because if you look at numbers and people say, well, I don't want any Black officers over here. I don't want any white officers over here. When we start that, it's kind of dangerous because people in River Oaks, they'll say, well, you know what? I don't want any Black or brown officers over here. So we got to be real careful about that and hold every man and woman accountable with that badge and make sure they're doing the right thing and do have the diversity when we can. But we need good policing with good hearts, and I don't care what race you are. Hope that answers it. I'll yell.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass the floor to Alan Galloway, I believe. Are you present here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
All right, you had a question to ask?
Yeah, I had a question. So with the recent incident that occurred in Virginia with the Army official, the lieutenant getting pepper sprayed, and he got pulled over for a traffic violation, and the officers immediately drew their guns approaching the car. My question revolved around what are the procedures in training on de-escalation situations, and what are the procedures on use of force within your departments?
Well, I'll start and then my other colleagues can get in on it. De-escalation is everywhere in our training right now in HPD, and this is not a post-Floyd incident. It's been in our curriculum, and people should de-escalate, especially a trained professional in law enforcement. And when you look at that footage, did the officers de-escalate? I don't think so at all, but the goal should be that everybody gets home safely. And then when you go into work with that goal, you know what, not only myself, but everybody else get home safely. And I treat people with respect and dignity. You know, it pretty much sometimes if the officer would just slow down, you don't even have to say a whole lot. Just slow your butt down a little bit. Okay, see what's going on, because I looked at that video last night, and it troubled me a little bit. Here you got a young man who is an active military person serving our nation. What did he do that was so wrong? He was respectful, he was patient. You know, just because you drive to a lit area for a few minutes, you put your blinkers on, an officer should have common sense to say, well, hey, you know what? That's what he or she is probably doing. Don't overreact. That guy was never a threat to them. And that's what really bothers me on that. So in terms of force and use of force, if you treat people right and talk to them right, 99% of the time, you're gonna be all right out there. Now, it's a dangerous world, and things can go awry very quickly. So you have to be ready for that. But most of the time, if you treat people right and slow down and talk to them right, you're gonna be all right. We got a hand up there.
Thank you so much. I wanted to open the floor up to the other officers that are here. What is your input on this?
Well, oh, go ahead, Chief Miller, you have a chance.
No, I was actually pointing at you. I know it's hard to tell.
Oh.
I was deferring to Chief Rodriguez.
No, I was just gonna say that, yeah, I saw that video as well. And you know, you always want to make sure that you get the full context of every situation, right? And so sometimes, unfortunately, we will get snippets of what happened in a situation. So I fully expect that those officers that entire situation will be reviewed, and they should be held accountable if they violated. But I agree with Chief Finner that there was not a good effort, in my opinion, for de-escalation. And we trained for the officers, because what I've always told officers and this was told to me when I was a young officer, if you come in really high with somebody, really high strung, you got nowhere else to go. You get yourself kind of painted in a corner where now it's a standoff, right? You've been very aggressive. It's hard to bring that down. So I was always told you should always try to start at your lowest and let the situation dictate how much will be escalated, but always aim at coming in, like you said, like Chief Finner said, if you talk to people the right way, the majority of the time they're going to respond the right way. Here's the thing. We all want the same thing, right? We all want to be treated with respect. The community that we stop and the officers that stop the community want to be treated with respect. But if we're not showing that respect, then we've lost the battle right there. So we've got to remember that. And I think the important thing to try to get, that I've been trying to get across to our officers, is the mindset should be, we're guardians. I think there's different terms that are thrown about police officers. You've heard police officers are the warriors. We're guardians. We're here to protect people. So if we go in there with that mindset of trying to start here, we'll go with where it needs to go. Because as Chief Finner said, situations are fluid, and sometimes you got to be ready, and you can't be too complacent, because officers have been hurt and have been killed because they were not tactically ready for a response. They didn't see it coming. So it's a very difficult balancing act that officers have to play on the street. Every time you make a traffic stop, you never know what you're coming across. But again, if you come in really high, the way those officers seem to have come in on that night, you got nowhere else to go. And that's what I think happened. They were really aggressive and they couldn't tone it back down. If they had started down in a lower level, they might have been able to keep that at a de-escalated situation.
Right.
Thank you for your answer, Chief Rodriguez. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next question. All right, there are many. I'm trying to pick which one. Okay. What is the policy at each department if a complaint is filed against an officer? Why is it that after officers wrongfully kill people, we discover that they have used excessive force multiple times prior to the fatal incident?
I can hit it. Again, I like to look at specific cases. I'll tell you something. In Houston, if somebody has a sustained sight on excessive force, pretty difficult to keep your job around here. Okay. Now, I had a recent case, and I don't want to speak too long, but this is important. You got to understand, we can only do what the law allows us to do. There is a code, code 143 in the local state government code. It gives police officers the same rights as somebody has that's going to trial. So there's a thing called date of discovery and date of incident. So date of incident is when the incident occurred. The date of discovery is when the department discovered it, okay? So if date of incident is 180 days past, the only discipline I can give to a person is, the maximum discipline I can give to an officer is 15 days. And I had an incident where it happened 2 years ago, and they recently reported, we've done the investigation, and we sustained some sites. I can only give them 15 days off. So those challenges are there, but you know, normally if an officer violates use of force policy, they probably gonna be fired, and they should be.
Let me chime in here. Our situation is different, Chief Finner, than HPD. The officers at U of H within the system are completely at will. We're not guided by 143. We're not guided by the 180-day rule. So if an officer used excessive force within the campus system, he would probably be fired probably within a week or so. It's just completely different rules. There's no 48-hour notice. We can record. It's completely different. So our ability to separate problem employees is much greater than HPD, because HPD is guided, restricted, guided by the local government code. And Chief Finner has restrictions he has to work within, in addition to the meet and confer contract that officers have at HPD as well. Whereas within our system, we don't have a contract. Officers are not contracted. And in some of the cities that you see in other locations, such as Seattle, Portland, those officers also have contracts with rules and regulations regarding how they're administered discipline. So trying to have a uniform response to how officers are processed from a disciplinary standpoint, you have to first start looking at the law that governs that particular police department, whatever contracts and agreements that are in place. And usually once you read all of that, that will give you some perspective about why a case was handled a particular way versus the way it's handled at U of H, or the way it's handled at HPD, or the way it's handled in Seattle, or the way it's handled in Minneapolis. You have to have the background information in order to understand why those decisions are made.
And real quickly, because I know this is something that everybody should know, we have separated over the last 4.5 years over 200 officers from our agency. And a lot of people don't realize that, even with those restrictions of a 143 and contracts or whatnot. So we do fire people.
Thank you. So actually, I think about half the time has elapsed here, and we wanted to, this being a roundtable discussion, we actually wanted to see if you guys, the police chiefs, had specific questions directed towards students that a student, could potentially answer. Do you guys?
I don't know that I have any questions specific. Oh, go ahead, Chief Finner.
No, you go ahead. I've been talking a lot. I'm a yield.
I was just saying that President Loya, Hiba Loya, and myself have spent a lot of time since the George Floyd murder, doing town halls and getting a lot of input from students. So I don't know that I have any direct questions today for students, but I'll tell you what some of my takeaways were, and perhaps that'll prompt students on this call to speak up. My takeaway after it was all said and done and we discussed things was that students want to know, or at least I'm gonna speak for UHCL. I don't know about everywhere else. Students wanted to know the officers better. And so I spent a lot of time with the student leaders and advocates, but I was hearing from them that it's the line level student, not the student leaders, that also crave the relationship with the police or to understand police better. And so a lot of the things that I've been doing since then have been really focused down in the granular level to get to those students. Would you agree, Hiba?
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge concern that we had, where it was like student leaders knew what was going on. Student leaders that are actively involved knew the officers on campus. Student leaders knew who is patrolling the campus and who's protecting them. But everybody else, the 10,000 students that are just going from class to their car, had no idea what was happening. And with the political climate and the social climate that we have, as Chief Finner stated in the beginning, some just the badge and the uniform can just be really off-putting. And so to just see that and not know the person behind, and not it's almost like you don't see that person as a human anymore. So it's really putting a name to the face and humanizing these officers is what made a difference for us. Yeah.
And so I guess I said all that to derive this one question is, would any student here feel that that's the way you feel? You feel a lack of a connection with the officers that patrol your area, patrol your campus, patrol your city. Is that a same or similar feeling, or no? Anyone? Oh, I see Jabri.
Hello.
Jabri.
Yes, Jabria. I would have to agree. That is definitely one of my concerns, but I would also say that I have a concern for the people who aren't students that might be on our campus as well. I guess my concern is that the same humanity that is applied to students would be applied to people who are non-students, because I live in third ward at U of H, and we have a lot of people who are, from third ward that don't go to U of H, that may go to TSU, or who aren't in school at all. And I'm just concerned that everybody will be just as protected as the students.
Well, I can let Chief Moore chime in since he's the chief there, but let me tell you, I spent 3 years with Chief Moore at the Central Campus. And from my personal experience as the patrol captain, that is the case, is everyone that's coming and going. I think 20,000 visitors to the MD Anderson Library. Is it a day?
A day.
A day. Yeah, it was some incredible amount. Not all of those are students. Those are literally visitors. And so it's like a small city. You have 10,000 students on the campus. You have a total of 43,000 students on the campus coming and going. And then that's not including staff and faculty. So it's literally treated like a city where everyone is getting the attention and the service that they require. So whenever I went to Clear Lake, I'll quit talking. Night and day difference. So it's a completely different environment. I think you got to watch out for the wild animals and the deer and all of that coming to heckle people. So it's different.
Chief,
So,
I'm
yeah.
laughing at you, man, because I'm from the hood, but I also got my master's degree at University of Houston, Clear Lake. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But-
the biggest problem we have is deer in the middle of the
I
road.
know. I was there. All right.
So
I'm
I'm not downplaying that, but just back to your point, I can personally assure you that everyone is given the same level of service, whether you're a student or a visitor. And I can defer to Chief Moore if he has anything to add to that.
One of the, I'm going to say it's a myth that at U of H campus, people think that much of the crime is being committed by people coming from third ward attacking the campus. And that's absolutely not the case. People from the neighborhood are not coming on campus doing things. For the most part, we have some thefts on campus, which many of those thefts are internal situations. And we actually have people who come from all parts of the city and outside of the city to come to U of H to commit a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So people will just attribute any crime that occurs on campus to third ward. And I can just tell you that's not the case. People actually travel into U of H to commit crimes. And I'm reminded of a robbery that happened on campus. It was a guy dropped his girlfriend off every day to school. And he said, man, security here sucks. You know, you can do anything. That's what the girl kept telling him. And so he drops her off for class one day, and then he goes and commits a robbery while he's waiting for his girlfriend to get out of class. And I think they lived in Pearland. So people just automatically assumed that it was somebody that came from the neighborhood and did that. But that's just not the case. And our relationship with the neighborhood is actually great. We, Saturday, we had an event with HPD people there, various police agencies where we played basketball in CUNY homes. And it's just something that we do. I mean, so a lot of things that are positive, people don't get that message. They don't get that information. But as you know, several chiefs have said, a lot of officers are doing a lot of great work, but it gets overshadowed when a few people do things that are horrific, which should not occur, which is embarrassing to the profession. And we feel the same way that you feel when we see some of the things that we see in the media. But you know, my charge is still to get out there and to help students be successful. And my charge is not law enforcement. And I think that helps your perspective. If you can think about your job being greater than being a law enforcer, it's about being a peacekeeper and making things better. So sometimes making an arrest doesn't make things better. Sometimes a warning, sometimes a discussion can make things better. Sometimes not doing anything from an enforcement standpoint makes things better. And so officers have to feel fulfilled by not making an arrest. An arrest does not make you successful. Helping someone to be successful in protecting your community is what makes you successful.
It looks like we have a student with their hand raised. So I'm going to go and pass the floor to that student.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I have two questions. The first one being, how do departments currently use technology to help police officers do their jobs? And my second question is, what new technologies do you wish to see being used that can help you guys reduce brutal and racist acts? And the reason I asked the second question is because we as students have the ability to create these technologies and devote time and contribute to them if necessary.
Well, I tell you what, I'll speak first on that. We use technology a lot, but technology has a cost to it. And I don't know about U of H. I know their pockets are real deep, but my budget is very, very tight, and we have challenges every day. So if you know some technology and you want to come out and help us, I'm going to hook you up with our Director of Tech Services, Mr. Bell. And you send me an email and we'll get you rolling on it, because seriously though, we're so short-staffed at HPD and the budget is tight. You have to use technology as a force multiplier. If you don't, you're gonna be behind the ball. Using your cell phones with technology in there, cameras, all that good stuff. Shot spotter, it's a gunshot detection system. All that stuff, but it's a cost to it. So you have any ideas, you please hook me up and you come visit me at headquarters. I'll buy lunch.
I think the technology that we're using, from license plate reading cameras to drones to chemical testing for various things, I think that the technology just supports the effort. If I was going to do something to enhance law enforcement, it would be probably in an area you wouldn't think. I would be looking at people who have mental situations, getting them the help that they need, eliminating the stigma of getting that help, so that people who have those psychological needs are addressed separate from the PD. Now, PD will come out and they will address those things, but sometimes those things will escalate just because of where that person is from a psychiatric standpoint. So again, giving people the freedom to feel comfortable in getting treatment having treatment available for those persons, and having those people not be a part of the criminal justice system. And if they are part of the system, then probably an enhancement in our jail system to ensure that people are getting the needed treatment that they can, and that's addiction included. So they're not back in the system again, and the police are dealing with something that's not truly a law enforcement issue, but it ends up in law enforcement's lap because those psychological addictive things are not being addressed in an area separate from the PD, even before it gets to the PD.
I've been pretty impressed with the latest body camera technology, and we've been upgrading our equipment. And you know, if you are an innovator and looking to enhance things that are already on the market, look at the camera systems that are out there and the bells and whistles. I think when we talk about accountability for officers and for the community, having the camera systems in place that are dependable, that capture the correct information, the things that you need after the fact, that's a great tool. You know, but I will finish that thought with, you know, there still has to be accountability of the user. And otherwise, body camera is just capturing some unaccountable activities. So, but as far as technology goes, I love the new body camera stuff.
Thank you for that, Chief Miller.
One more technology piece, and it would be probably a programming issue, a computer programming issue, maybe a regression model or a cluster analysis to determine what would make a good officer. So from the hiring standpoint, is there information, is there a matrix that can be developed to better understand what makes the best officer in 2021 versus what would make the best officer in 1980? Because being an officer now, you have to be much more dynamic, much more flexible. You have to be much more in tune with what's happening, much more learned in certain ways. So is there some modeling that can be put in place to help determine, you know, what might assist someone hiring to consider in hiring someone that there's something special about this person that will make them successful as an officer in 2021?
Thank you for that, Chief Moore. I'm
Certainly.
now to pass the floor to Aluchi, one of our MSLA representatives, to ask a few questions.
Hey, so actually one of my questions was already asked, but I do have another question which is not directly related to us as students, but my question is, us living in Houston, it's pretty diverse. So I wanted to know if y'all interact with officers from other countries, small rural towns, because I could say me personally, that's where I have the most fear, like driving and what's going to happen if an officer stops me in Bastrop, Texas, for example. So my question was, do y'all interact with officers in like nearby small cities?
Yes, we do. There is a licensing called TICO, licensing agency in the state of Texas that we all have to get our certification. But the fact of the matter is, you remember I said at the beginning, 18,000 police agencies in the nation. It's not a good system, if you ask me. There should be some uniformity in policies and procedures across the board. So you wouldn't have to worry about where you're traveling in small agencies or a larger city, because let's be honest, there's different styles of policing, and it should be one form of policing in our great nation. You know, it should be upright, constitutional policing, and sometimes it's not. And I'm not here to put a small agency down, because we certainly have some problems and some issues in our large agencies, but there needs to be more consistency. And that's what a lot of people complain about in reform, you know, and say, well, you know, one officer possibly can get fired in this state or from this department, and he or she can go and work somewhere else. So those things we really need to look at. And you young, intelligent, smart students, I hope that's some of the things that y'all need to focus on, you know, when you talking to potential candidates, political candidates. Discuss that, some of those things with them. I'll yield.
And I want to add on to that. And just like you said, we have so many officers, law enforcement, deputies, constables, sheriffs across the state of Texas. And if you do go to a smaller town or go to a different campus, they're individuals. Police officers have to be held accountable for the individual. And we can meet individuals doing law enforcement training at TCO, where different agencies can come in or from different states. But in that moment, at that time, it is that individual that has to be held accountable for being there and not just being an enforcer, but serving the community upright. And so we always have to hold an individual accountable for serving. And that's what we're there. We're there to serve, not to be an enforcer, not to be anything else, but to serve our community. And that's any color or any creed of our citizens, that when we put our badge on, put our uniform on, we're there to serve. And if it's a violation and traffic stop, there's a violation. If it's a warning, just to let you know you're going a little bit too fast or tail light is out or whatever it may be, that's what we're there for. And we got to be held accountable for those actions only. And you're not going to get the same robotic officer every time you get a traffic stop and expect that. Yes, that's what the assumption is that, man, I know this officer on U of H campus, they're down to earth, they're just like a cousin. Or if you go to HPD in your community and you know the officer, but you may not get that on the other side of town, or you may not get that 300 miles away from your house. But if you hold yourself accountable in the action and the respect, and hold that individual coming up to your car in the same type respectful situation. But like I say, you can't make every situation a robotic box.
Let me add one piece to this, and this is about finances. Police departments are funded differently, and depending on where you go, that makes a difference in how the police department functions. For example, at U of H gives me X amount of dollars to run the police department every year. So we don't have to write tickets to earn any money. Matter of fact, there's no motivation for an officer to write a ticket. There's no benefit, there's no reward for him to do it. So just so you know, U of H, we get $5 for every ticket that we write if there's a conviction, and it probably costs me $75 to send the guy to court. So I lose money every time we write a ticket. So tickets is not a motivation for me because it's not part of my funding stream. In some towns, the police department is funded through ticket revenue. So they have a vested interest in writing tickets because that's how the department is funded. That's how salaries are made. That's how raises are included, because ticket revenue, that's why red light cameras were big for a period of time, because it was a way for people to fund their agencies. So if you go into a small town, you mentioned Bastrop, if you have issues in Bastrop, if you look at how the police department is funded, where the money goes, that may be part of the answer about the way that the policing is done there. And again, I don't know anybody in Bastrop, but I do know that financial piece is important, because if that ticket revenue goes directly to the police coffers and that's their primary funding source, then that's going to be a location that's going to write a lot more tickets.
Well, thank you, Chief Moore, for that answer. So it is 5:55, and trying to adhere to everyone's time. I want to use these last 5 minutes to kind of wrap up here and kind of thank everyone for attendance. I think the two groups that I would like to, single out here, and I really appreciate them, is first off, our police chiefs for, taking time out of their day to come have this conversation with us. I think the main thing here is, continuing to have these types of conversations will eventually, in my hope, or at least in MSLA's hope, to reduce these incidents that we've seen in last couple of days. So we sincerely hope here at MSLA This conversation was the beginning of the part of the solution. So thank you again to all the police chiefs for spending your time with us today. The other group that I would like to kind of recognize here is our awesome social justice and civic engagement committee here at MSLA. They have done an amazing job of planning and handling all the correspondence for the event over the course of the last couple of months. So I want to recognize Margaret, Hiba, Oluchi, Yolanda, Jabrea, Anna Margaret, Hannah. All of these students collectively came from campuses across Houston with the intention of finding a solution, or at least being a part of the solution to, this problem of police brutality. And I think, they've done an awesome job. So if everyone here could join me in kind of applauding their efforts.
Special shout out, if I can, sorry to interrupt, Vishaal, but special shout out goes to Margaret because she's in law school and she essentially put all this together herself, pretty much. So special shout out to Margaret. Thank you for your amazingness.
Good job. Good job.
Go ahead. I think someone else.
No, I just wanted to say thank you all again. Thank you all for coming. And just, we really hope that this was really productive and that we're able to just continue moving forward and just continue just building these relationships and continue just speaking out and speaking with one another. It's one thing to get things from the news and social media, but it's another thing to, quite frankly, just speak to somebody who is actively involved in doing these on the daily. And so we just ask that you continue having these conversations just to really truly understand what is going on in the community and how we can all help. So thank you all, not only to the panelists, but to all of you for attending and just being here. So I really wanted to say that. Thank you.
I want to say thank you as well. I put it in the chat, but you guys were awesome today. Great questions. This is what I know the other chiefs and we enjoy these opportunities to be able to talk to you guys. So thank you.
I hope we grilled you guys.
No, a big thanks. We always learn something. Such an intelligent group. Please come and visit me at HPD headquarters anytime. And I'd love to get together with you guys and ladies very soon. Thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And I know I speak for the other chiefs. If a question comes up, even if it's in the group, the planning group, and you want to just have individual conversations or reach out and just meet and chat about things, always feel free to do that. Never feel like you can't, especially at Clear Lake. Just shoot me an email. Hiba's got my cell phone. Just let's talk. Let's address things.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for the invitation. I think that's important to always keep the line of communication open. And just like all the other chiefs said, law enforcement, we're here to make sure that there is no miscommunication and no cut off on information. And I think that's where things are right now. A lot of information is not being informed. So have my email, contact information. If you have questions, shoot me an email, give me a call, and I answer questions. I enjoy communication.
Yep. Well,
I couldn't have said it better. I echo that exactly. If you have a question, issue, just call me, let me know. We can work it out. I'm sure of that.
Yep. We appreciate everyone's, being open and having this conversation with us. We apologize for not being able to get to all the questions, but it is our hope that we can continue to have conversations like this and that those questions may be addressed hopefully later on. With that, I want to bring this Balancing the Badge talk to an end. Thank you again for everyone attending. And if you have any other questions or concerns about MSLA specifically, just email us at mesla.houston@gmail.com. Thank you.